In the meantime, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who is calling in from Sweden. Dr. Merritt Polk is an Associate Professor in Human Ecology at the School of Global Studies at the University of Gothenburg, and she's a co-director at Mistra Urban Futures. So she works on methods for the co-production of knowledge and capacity building between different disciplines, as well as private and semi-private and public organisations. So welcome to the session, Merritt, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very happy to be here at the first global conference on research integration and implementation. And I'm just pleased to be able to speak to you about some experiences that I've had then at Mistra Urban Futures on different types of research integration. And the subject of my talk is how does transdisciplinarity contribute to sustainability? And you might wonder why this, why did I have this title? And so the idea behind this is to critically explore the different characteristics of transdisciplinarity, which kind of the reason behind why so many of us who use this word, why we think it is better equipped to deal with sustainability-related problems than other forms of interdisciplinary and problem-based research. And I'm going to do this then by looking at kind of briefly going back and clarifying the motivation behind transdisciplinary research, or I may say TD research, so bear with me on that. I'd like to also kind of look into the premises which underlie why we think transdisciplinary research is better and more effective for societal problem solving. And then I'd like to take these premises and spend the majority of my time talking about a case study from Mistra Urban Futures and seeing if do these premises actually hold up then in specific examples when we try to implement this type of methodology. Okay. The motivation for using TD research to solve wicked problems is something that if I were there in the audience and could see you, I probably would think, oh, you all, you know this better than I do, or equally as well. So I just want to kind of briefly say, talk about what are the characteristics that make us need to have another sort of methodological approach. And I guess the first characteristic is, or the first motivation is the characteristics of the problems themselves that we're dealing with. Because they transcend, they're causally complex, and they transcend the spatial, temporal, the sector, and disciplinary boundaries which we work with today. And this transcension, or this transcending, then engages a myriad of different actors on different governance levels, in different disciplines, etc. And also, that's just one aspect of it. Another problem is that so many of the societal goals that we're working with today, they're highly contested and ambiguous. And we know that climate change and sustainability are two such perfect examples. We don't agree upon what these goals mean or how we can operationalize them. They're ethically loaded. They're highly contested. And so these types of characteristics, this motivation, is what kind of puts us within the research community in looking for different ways of trying to deal with problems which exceed our institutional structures, which exceed kind of our policymaking and administrative organizations and systems for dealing with societal development. So this leads then to an evolving role for science. And again, I'm going to just briefly give two examples of this, two examples of how science can evolve to better deal with these types of wicked problems. And the first one is Funowitz and Rabitz's article from 1993 on post-normal science, when they bring up this idea that when we can't distinguish values from facts, and when facts are additionally they're uncertain, values are in dispute and stakes high and decision urgent. This classic quote from Funowitz and Rabitz. How can science deal with this? And they then suggest this idea of post-normal science, which has different characteristics. I guess the most interesting or the most well-known example of this type of work is the Mode 2, of course, discussion from Gibbons and their work, and Nowotny and Scott, etc., in 1994 on the new production of knowledge. And here they talk about we need to have a science that then moves into the context of application, into a context focus, that it transgresses disciplinary boundaries, that it occurs not just within the university proper, but also occurs within other types of organizations, that it is socially accountable, it's relevant for looking at societal problems, and because of these different characteristics, we need new forms of quality control. The term that that I use when I'm talking about this type of research, or this type of integrated research. And here, I don't really have any time to go into this kind of, there's a very in-depth and well-developed discussion on what transdisciplinary means and how it's been used in different ways, which I don't really have any time to go into. But so I'm just going to give you kind of an overall definition of a working definition of what we use at the center. And this is that, transdisciplinary research focuses on contributing to solving real-world problems in a specific context. And the characteristics then of this research is that it includes academics and their knowledge from different disciplines, which is something that we usually refer to as interdisciplinarity. And additionally, in this type of transdisciplinary approach, which I'm interested in, it also includes practitioners and their knowledge and expertise from different types of real-life contexts. And this is an important difference here, that it includes non-academic sources of knowledge and expertise in the knowledge production process. So if we kind of generalize from this type of definition, if we look at this and try to figure out, we go back to the question is, how does transdisciplinarity then contribute to sustainability? So there's some implicit claims if we look at this approach to society, to research. And here's some of the claims that, through kind of a literature review from some leading researchers in this area, these are some of the claims that I've kind of, the implicit claims that I've kind of teased out of the literature. Sometimes they're very explicit, sometimes they're less so. And and these are the ones. The first one is that the in-depth participation of responsible and affected stakeholders, and integrating different types of relevant and broad knowledge from both practice and research, as we just mentioned, that this combination leads to the creation of socially robust results, which can then contribute to solving sustainability-related problems. And I think this is really important, that we think about the way, if we go back to this motivation for transdisciplinary research, that the contestation of problems, the engagement of different actors, this is where having that's wide participation is so important. The complexity of the problems, this is where we need a broader base of relevant and broad knowledge that's not just limited to academic knowledge. Okay, so this is, you see how this kind of ties into the problems themselves? And so these are the claims that I would like to then to talk about, and talk about from a case study from Mr. Urban Futures. Okay, Mr. Urban Futures is a Center for Sustainable Urban Development, and I would say that it is a transdisciplinary center. It was the bid, the application itself, the competitive bid that we put together, was based upon the requirement that we had actors from the city, from urban development that were involved in this. And so the whole kind of structure, the whole kind of motivation for the center is in and of itself transdisciplinary. And what, of course, the focus of the center is on solving and having, contributing to solving complex urban challenges. And kind of the ethos and the philosophy behind the center is that we're trying to open up the box of, knowledge is produced at the university. And we want to open up that box of knowledge and say that we are all knowledge producers, we are all knowledge bearers, and we are all knowledge users. So this is kind of this, and this is what we talk about in this transdisciplinary methods, that this is the basis of this, kind of the center ethos. And, organizationally, the center is based on joint ownership and funding. We have something called the Gothenburg Consortium, which is the main kind of funding body, along with MISTRA, which is one of the funders, and CETA. And it has 7 partners in the consortium, the Gothenburg Consortium, and it has 4 of those are from the public bodies, and 3 of them are from different research institutes. And just briefly, the public bodies include, for example, the city of Gothenburg itself, the regional decision-making level, the regional arm of the national government, and the final public body is the Greater Gothenburg Organization of Municipalities. So all of the public bodies that work with decision-making and implementation of urban development own and fund and put in-kind staff into the center itself. Okay, and we also have long-term commitments. It's from hopefully about a 10-year time span for that. Okay, so at this center, I wanted to just say it's not just in Gothenburg. We have our headquarters in Gothenburg, but we also have platforms in Manchester, in Kisumu, in Cape Town, and then in Shanghai. And in each of these cities, we're setting up kind of similar types of consortium based upon the needs of those cities with different types of public bodies and private bodies. Okay, so we've carried out a number of projects at East Urban Futures, and I'm going to talk about just the ones that we did just in the first 2 years of center when we're establishing the center. And these were kind of chosen to kind of give examples of different types of problems. So they engaged different types of actors, had different types of kind of implementation problems, so we could have a kind of a wide variety of substantive issues to test these on. And they included, for example, climate change adaptation. We had one on multi-level governance, collaboration for multi-level governance, and one on what we called urban games for dialogue and learning. And the whole basis of these projects is that we talk about symmetrical participation. And what this means is that we didn't just want to have we wanted to really break up the idea that research was going to be led by researchers. As I said, we wanted to operationalize the transdisciplinarity and not just have it, kind of a rhetorical thing that we were just talking about. So what we did was we had the projects were originating from the public bodies. We worked with co-leadership pairs from both research and practice for each project. This is something we continue to work with. We engaged broad groups of expertise from both practice and research. And we've had a specific attention to inclusion, who was included, how do we include them, to in-depth collaboration, knowledge integration, to usability and reflection throughout the process. And so if we move over into, did we have in-depth participation of stakeholders in the process, this first premise? And I would say yes. We did, to some extent. We had in-depth participation. We had, as I said before, we had the co-leaders were recruited from both policy areas, from both the four consortium public bodies, and from our academic partners as well. So we had a broad base of both natural, technical, interdisciplinary, and social science representatives from the academic world. And from the public bodies and the public sphere, we had a different variety of planners. I mean, as I said, these were different substantive issues that, of course, then engage different types of levels and different sectors in these different organizations. So, including different administrators. We also had, and policymakers. We also had in the business the business focused project, and in the one that focused on urban empowerment, we worked also with citizens, NGOs, and different types of business representatives. And our in-depth participation was based upon. We're really working specifically with not only including these different groups, but also that they actually were collaborating, in the projects. We worked with different types of democratic meeting methods. We worked with integrating all the different groups in the actual problem, the formulation of the problem, in how, we're designing the project and collecting the data, in doing the analysis, and then working on the implementation. So it was a very kind of a long, continual focus on different types of working with both of these groups and uniting their different types of knowledge. And we also focused quite a bit on dialogue-based data collection in these groups as well. Okay, and the second premise is, was there integration of relevant and broad knowledge from both practice and research? And I would say, again, I guess I want to step back and say, I don't really have time to talk about all of the challenges and the incommensurabilities and kind of the arguments and the problems that we had in these projects, because of course there were tons, and all of you who work in different types of research integration know that there were tons of problems and tons of challenges that we really had to work through. So I'm just kind of focusing on giving one view of this. But if we go to the second premise, there was, yes, we did see quite a bit of integration of relevant and broad knowledge from both practice and research. I would say yes, that this focus on inclusion and these different methods this was something that was able to lead to this knowledge integration. This occurred in different ways. Again, like I said, it wasn't unproblematic. I think overall, just kind of to give you some brief examples, that we were able to really join both practical and theoretical insights from the participants in the project working groups and from the different advisory and focus groups. And I think that just listening to what these different individuals learned from this process was just, it was quite inspiring, actually, because there was such an incredible amount of learning, both from the project leaders and project participants who are from the academic world and from the practitioners. And and these projects have been highly appreciated by all of the participants. We also were able to work on integrating different types of resident experience or citizen experience and business interests, as I said, in designing different interventions and models. And we did some of the results we had that for example, we working hand in hand with different planners and gamers and researchers in designing dialogue tools, online dialogue tools, and different type of iPad games where we worked intensely with students. So there was this, this knowledge, these different groups were engaged, and there was a great deal of knowledge integration. Okay, so moving on to the third and kind of the most important premise of looking at this: how does transdisciplinarity contribute to sustainability? So was socially robust knowledge produced that can contribute to societal problems? And here I can say, well, yes and no. I mean, first of all, we could spend like hours discussing what socially robust means. And here I've kind of taken I've thrown together a definition, and I said, when I talk about this, and when I kind of look through the literature, that by socially robust, we usually mean something that is context sensitive, that it's relevant for a specific area, and that it is also user accessible. And if this is how we defined socially robust knowledge, then I would say there was a great deal of socially robust knowledge produced in the processes. And there's a number of examples that we could give here. For example, the multi-level governance process, they came up with a lot of really interesting insights which could be used to increase the effectiveness of collaboration as a governance tool, this kind of cross-sector, multi-level political collaboration, which they looked at in the project as making that much more effective as a governance tool in Sweden. The climate change project, for example, they broadened the political discourse for climate change adaptation. I would say not only in Gothenburg, but maybe to some extent also in Sweden. They brought in a kind of a different way of looking at climate change adaptation. And that was great. And those are just two examples. But we had a big problem in what do you do with that knowledge? How does there's the big step from producing socially robust knowledge and actually contributing to solving societal problems. And we all know that last point, it's very incredibly hard to gauge, how did we contribute to sustainability? Well, we don't know, because sustainability is a long-term goal that we can only kind of chip away. I think about this big mountain and we're just kind of chipping away at it. We can only have these kind of incremental steps in the right direction. So perhaps some of the insight that was gained in the projects then went on to have some, in 3 years or in 2 years or in 10 years, had maybe some huge impact somewhere else because someone got a new idea and could do something. We don't know. We can't. These types of impacts are really hard to measure and to capture. But one thing that we can talk about is what about transdisciplinary research? How can we look at that? What are the strengths and weaknesses of transdisciplinary research itself? And I would say that one of the things that I think is really interesting is that transdisciplinarity in these projects embodies a paradox. Okay, so in order for it to be successful, and in order for us to really get that participation we're all talking about, this and get this knowledge integration that we're talking about, we need to create these kind of neutral spaces. We need to create a hybrid space that's outside of both the university proper and outside of practice itself. And this space is open, it's autonomous, it's kind of innovative. It's an incredibly exciting space. I can definitely witness to that, having been involved in it. And we can successfully join different types of knowledge in this space. But the paradox is that this space then is isolated. That what creates the success for transdisciplinarity is also what leads to it being kind of outside. And kind of, what are you guys really doing? I mean, it's not. We have a lot of academics who are saying, well, transdisciplinarity it's not real research. You're bringing in different types of knowledge. What is that? What does that mean? So we have some problems with using the knowledge both within in science and in practice then afterwards. So some of the problems is that this idea of legitimacy. Is this knowledge legitimate outside of the processes and the participants? Is it synced to formal decision making? Is it adequately anchored in informal administrative routines? And how effective is it then for promoting social change? Okay, so my final slide is that how can we deal with this TD paradox? I want to say that I guess my work right now is I'm trying, looking back at these different projects which we followed. We had, intensive interviews the whole way through and had a lot of, meetings the whole way through. So there's a great deal of documentation about this, and I'm really trying to learn as much as possible. What went wrong, what went right? How can we deal with the results of this example that I've had in Sweden? And I want to say that, I think that overall that these transdisciplinary research, different types of integrated research, are highly valuable for harnessing diverse knowledge and expertise about different types of societal problems like sustainability. And we need these hybrid spaces. We need this autonomous and innovative. We need to produce this situated knowledge. I think it's an important complement to a disciplinary and interdisciplinary research. But there's also a number of institutional, and you can talk about cognitive barriers, and we can talk about many practical barriers, which that's would be a whole nother talk, actually, that really kind of make it very hard to use the different results from transdisciplinary research. And so I think personally is that the things that I'm interested in working on and getting some input on is how do we, we need to work on, on dealing with the gap. I mean, for some of us, I would say, naively for myself, for example, that I thought that transdisciplinarity could, in any case, diminish or, kind of make that implementation gap, that science policy gap, a little bit, less problematic or a little bit smaller. But in ways, it doesn't quite do that. So I think that we really need to think about that implementation gap, the science policy gap, and think about what can we do with transdisciplinarity to make it bridge that gap or make it, possible to have maybe some rope bridges put over it, very tentative bridges. And I think some of the things we could do, we need to create better institutional support from both science and practice. We need to work on maintaining autonomy of these processes, but they still need to be anchored in practice. And we need to find and develop different strategies for increasing the legitimacy of transdisciplinarity for both science and policy spheres. And that was what I had to say, and I wanted to please, we have a new webpage that was launched in the spring at Mr. Urban Futures, and here's the address for that. So please go in and see some of the work that we're doing. I've just touched about it very briefly. And here's also my email address, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Merritt, for your very energetic and engaging talk to us. Have we got any online questions to start off with? Has anyone got anything to offer? Or I'll leave that with you, online audience, while we go to the local audience, because we actually have several hands up here. There's a microphone. Oh, you've already got a microphone, Gerald. Why don't you start?
Sorry, I've snaffled it too soon. What you call the TD paradox, I think, is really an essential problem that we need to get to grips with. I just wanted to share one of my experiences and see if you've had the same experience. I would say that whenever I've done any kind of intervention that's been framed as research, so the policymakers and the other stakeholders are interested in it, but haven't necessarily asked for it and grasped it, it doesn't lead to change. It leads to interesting insight and not necessarily change. When it's not framed as research, when somebody says, I've got a real need for this, some agency wants to get others involved, and they're asking for change, they're asking for facilitated change, then it gets action. And it does tie into the decision-making processes. From a research point of view, both are equally valuable, but maybe the framing of research is part of the problem.
Yes. Yes, I think that's pretty much exactly what we've experienced. And thank you. That's a really great example. We've had people, as you know, when we built with the consortium, with the Gothenburg consortium, we have the mayor, we have all this high-level people signing on, to give us money in times of austerity, even in Sweden. And yet that high-level support has not yet really trickled down through the different organizations. I think that one of the problems is that there's a lot of territorialism in the different sectors, in the different kind of levels of governance, where it's really hard to have even politically well-established cross-sector processes are having problems actually getting a great deal of support from the different kind of sector-based, the different silos, both within practice. So that's one of the challenges that we're also facing.
Okay, thank you very much, Merritt, for that. We've got a couple of questions up the back.
Okay, John Young from the Overseas Development Institute. I would just echo what Gerald has just said. I mean, I don't actually think this is transdisciplinary research, what you're doing. I mean, it seems to me the fundamental principle of, or one of the fundamental principles of transdisciplinary research is that it's problem-focused and it's working with decision makers who want help to make decisions, and that's kind of what Gerald was saying. And so I was quite worried about some of the comments you were making about creating a hybrid space, about creating spaces outside everything else into which you have this interesting dialogue with the different stakeholders. I mean, that's the problem. If you create a hybrid space that's outside real life, of course you're not going to get anything which is useful for anybody. What you need to do is create a space in which you can have a real conversation about a real problem and can bring the different stakeholders into that. And I think probably the biggest problem with that, in my experience with transdisciplinary research, is actually getting the researchers to allow anybody else to set the research agenda. And nearly always they come in, they have an interesting topic they want to pursue, and they're kind of cruising around looking for a place to do this interesting research that they want to do. That's absolutely not the way it should be done. It should be focusing on a problem, talking to the decision makers, finding out what it is that they want to know, working with them to find the answers to those questions in collaboration with them in order to take some action at the end of it.
Thanks very much, John. We're running a little short of time, so if you can keep your answer to that quite brief, that would be really helpful.
It's a really great point, John. Thank you. Yeah, I guess that I agree with what you said. At the same time, that all of these projects, the project ideas, came from leading practitioners. These are, you know, these projects came from the practice itself. I mean, I can't really emphasize that more. And even, but I guess I disagree with that. I agree that we need to have some sort of a hybrid space, then perhaps more within practice. But if it's not just going to be consulting, we still need to create a platform where we have different types of knowledge integration from both practice and research. And I think that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. It's really good to have a couple of different perspectives coming in from the audience. I think it keeps everybody engaged,
Yes.
and I think there's plenty of room for further discussion on those issues that were outstanding. So please join me in thanking Merritt